the uncreated creator. To get into the temple, one went through porches and pylons until one reached the sanctuary. Only the pharaoh and the priests were allowed through this forest of pillars. There are 134 of them, like giant trees, supporting the heavens. On every pillar, sovereigns identified with gods, gods symbolizing kings, sometimes shown in the form of a vulture, like the goddess Nikbet. Scenes of grandeur, obelisks, statues of dozens of generations of pharaohs were put on show in Karnak for over 2,000 years, so that they should last as long as the heavens. But since these ancient times, at least 5,000 years ago, the Egyptian pyramid has rested on the peasant masses, despite the invasions of Asians, Greeks, Romans, and Arabs, and the slow emergence of modern technologies. Egypt, a gift of the Nile? A gift of the fellahs, more likely. In this desert land irrigated by a single river, the peasant folk have always been compelled to take water right to their fields, ever higher, ever further, using the antiquated shaduf or the sakye, driven by a blind steer. Irrigation, digging canals, maintaining the dikes, mixing silt into the earth, acts as old as Egypt itself. The Fellah still blames the high Aswan Dam for the disappearance of silt for the incredible proliferation of the water hyacinths. A purple and acid green plant which is born, lives, and multiplies on the banks of the Nile and its canals, so prolifically that it has to be relentlessly weeded out. After the yearly floods, black mud covered the valley floor with a fertile layer of earth. It was this silt that led to the ancient Egyptians referring to this habitable area as the Black Lands, in opposition to the red sands of the desert. Rice paddies have replaced the barley fields of ancient Egypt. The linen, figuring on frescoes, has given way to cotton and sugarcane. Long fiber cotton, one of the world's best, one of the most demanding, too, for care and labor. At cleansing and picking time, thousands of children are brought by their teachers into the fields. Children, say the fellas, come into the world with their loaves of bread under their arms. They are 10, perhaps 12 years old, and are helping to harvest the sugarcane under the watchful eye of the owner. With the other fellahs, these country children feed over half of their overpopulated Egypt and account for 70% of its exports. Reaping corn, threshing, were formerly considered to be religious acts. Just like the fisherman, heading fish back into his deep nets. Egypt, the eternal. The Aswan Dam is also thought to have fostered the development of a parasite which is very widespread in stagnant waters, bilharzia. Water that the fellas never filter in order not to deprive it of its life. The children bathe in it, women wash their linen in it, and do the washing up, beside the water buffaloes. Hospitable, generous people, although they often live below the poverty line. Families, just as in the past, still feed on beans, salted cheese, raw onions, fruit, and a little round loaf, baked at home, which is given a name of pharaonic origin, Batao. A family numbering 15 to 20 people is housed in 3 rooms of the clay house. For space is in short supply, and the family numerous. The authorities of both Muslim and Coptic Christians have prohibited birth control, and each year sees an extra 1 million Egyptians to house. Housing, the never-ending problem. The Nile silt, the giver of all. Fertility of the soil and the walls of houses. Throughout the countryside, there operate hundreds of craft industries producing bricks made of mud and straw. Here again, children constitute most of the labor force for a ridiculous salary. And the Nile silt, ever harder to come by, is still the raw material for the brickworks, despite the bans in force. On both sides of the Nile and along its canals stand Egypt's 14,000 hamlets and villages. Villages sometimes with illuminated walls, as if the Egyptians had memories of their artistic past. Only the gods have changed. The symbols, the hieroglyphics, and more than anything else, the style. Late afternoon, the village comes alive. Time for a chicha, a water pipe, and a meeting of friends. Big puffs of Persian tobacco, sometimes laced with a pinch of hashish. The pipe goes from mouth to mouth because chicha smoking is a ritual. Smokers on one side, spectators on the other. The women are at home. The rule is to talk loudly and on every subject: war, sports, politics, and usually with a touch of humor. How many Egyptians have changed the world by smoking a chicha? Some villages have water supply and electricity. Once a week it is market day. Chickens, ducks, fresh fruit, and vegetables change hands. On such a day, a fella may spend all his year's savings to buy a goat. In ancient Thebes, Luxor, Karnak, and the small villages along the West Bank, life is no longer regulated by the Nile floodwaters, but by the great religious feast days. Muslim, Coptic, celebrations, sometimes ones of centuries-old origin. Fellahs and fellahas crowd in, craftspeople, traders, livestock merchants. It's the great gathering. For 5 days, Luxor becomes the center of attraction for the whole of the Upper Valley. From far-off Aswan in the south, from Asyut in the north, every year the crowd is denser. Over the last 10 years, Egypt has witnessed an unprecedented upward surge of the Islamic religion. The Temple of Luxor is over 3,000 years old. For the great pharaonic feast of Opet, the golden statue of the god Ammon was taken there from Karnak on a sacred boat. In the 13th century, the Muslims erected a mosque in the precincts of the old sanctuary itself, in honor of Sheikh Abu al-Agag. Thus was sealed the final vanquishment of Luxor by the new religion. Since then, every year, the fair has set up its rusty swings at the foot of the Colossuses of Ramses. For Islam in Egypt is on all sides, ever within reach of the masses, whether young or old.